The pain was beyond anything Daehyun had ever experienced. It felt like his brain was being taken apart and rebuilt at the same time. Information poured into his mind faster than thought. He could feel the fortress around him as if it were his own body. Every corridor, every weapon system, every sensor became part of his awareness. He perceived time differently now. Seconds stretched into what felt like minutes. His thoughts moved at impossible speeds. He understood physics in ways that would have taken human scientists centuries to discover. The fortress's accumulated knowledge of millions of years opened up to him like a vast library, but he was still Daehyun. Buried beneath all the new capabilities and knowledge, his core identity remained. He still remembered being lonely. He still remembered the desire to prove himself. He still cared about protecting people. The fortress had promised he might lose his humanity, but somehow he had kept the most important parts of it. The transformation completed. Daehyun opened his eyes, though seeing through eyes was now just one small way he could perceive the world. He could see through the fortress's external sensors. He could detect energy patterns across the entire system. He knew exactly where every ship was positioned and what the Devourer remnant was doing. The situation was bad. The fragment had grown larger, feeding on the energy released by all the weapons fire directed at it. It was now the size of a small moon, and moving toward the fortress with clear intention. The defensive fleet was barely holding together. Several ships had taken damage. One of the corporate vessels was venting atmosphere. Daehyun opened communication channels to all ships. His voice echoed across every bridge simultaneously. All vessels. This is Sentinel Daehyun speaking on behalf of the Precursor Defense Network. I am taking command of Fortress Weapon Systems. Maintain your defensive formation and prepare to receive new coordinates. The fragment is targeting this location. We need to move the battlefield. On the military frigate, Captain Taijun nearly dropped his coffee. Daehyun, what happened to you? Daehyun's response came instantly. I did what was necessary. Follow my instructions if you want to survive. I understand this is difficult to accept, but there is no time for explanations. The fragment will reach critical mass in 47 minutes. If that happens, everything within 3 light years will be destroyed. Commander Myung looked at the sensor data and went pale. Captain, he is right. The energy readings are climbing exponentially. We need to trust him. Captain Taejun made a quick decision. All ships follow the Sentinel's coordinates. Weapons free. Coordinate your fire with fortress weapons. The fortress tore free from the rogue planet. Daehyun activated engines that had been dormant for millions of years. The entire structure moved, accelerating at speeds that should have torn it apart. But precursor engineering was beyond human understanding. The fortress's inertial dampeners kept everything stable. He positioned the fortress between the Devourer fragment and the fleet. The fragment immediately focused all its attention on this new threat. Dark energy beams slammed into the fortress's shields. Daehyun felt each impact as if it were a physical blow. The shields held, but they would not last forever. Time to fight back. Daehyun accessed the weapon systems. The fortress had weapons that humanity had only dreamed about. He selected the ones most likely to work against a Devourer entity. Reality anchors activated first, stabilizing the space around the fragment so it could not phase through attacks. Then came the causality cannons. These weapons fired projectiles backward through time, hitting their targets before the fortress even pulled the trigger. The fragment could not dodge what it did not know was coming. Massive chunks of its dark mass exploded as the causality round struck home. But the fragment adapted quickly, learning to sense temporal distortions and shifting its form to minimize damage. Daehyun coordinated with the fleet. He transmitted tactical data directly into their combat computers. The human and Vaughn ships attacked in perfect synchronization with the fortress weapons. When the fragment focused on one attacker, others struck from blind spots. When it tried to regenerate, dimensional cutters separated its matter faster than it could rebuild. On the corporate salvage ship, Jiwoo was frantically translating precursor tactical manuals that Daehyun had transmitted. She called out weapon combinations that proved especially effective. Director Hana coordinated her ship's attacks based on Jiwoo's guidance, putting aside her usual caution in favor of desperate aggression. Kian-Ra's Vaughn ship contributed ancient knowledge of Devourer weaknesses. The Vaughn weapons were primitive compared to precursor technology, but they used principles that exploited fundamental vulnerabilities in Devourer matter. Combined with the fortress's overwhelming firepower, they began to turn the tide, but the fragment was not defeated yet. It launched a massive counterattack, firing concentrated beams of dark energy at multiple targets simultaneously. Two of the military frigates took critical hits. One exploded completely. The other was disabled, drifting with life support failing. Dae-hyun felt the deaths of the crew on the destroyed ship. 83 people died in an instant. He knew their names now. He knew their service records. His expanded consciousness made him aware of every individual death. It was crushing, but he could not let it slow him down. If he failed now, everyone would die. The fragment tried a new tactic. It began to overload the fortress's main power core, forcing energy back through the shields. Alarms blared through Dae-hyun's consciousness. If the core exploded, the blast would destroy the fortress and everything nearby. The fragment was trying for mutual destruction. Dae-hyun made a split-second decision. He ejected the entire power core from the fortress, shooting it into space at near light speed. The fragment, sensing the massive energy signature, abandoned its attack on the fleet and chased after the core. It could not resist such a concentrated power source. As soon as the fragment was fully committed to pursuing the core, Dae-hyun opened a dimensional rift directly in its path. The technology was dangerous and unpredictable, but he had no choice. The rift led to the space between universes, a void where nothing could survive. The fragment flew into the rift at full speed, following the ejected power core. For a moment, Dae-hyun thought it would realize the trap and reverse course, but its hunger for energy overcame its intelligence. The fragment disappeared into the rift, and Dae-hyun immediately collapsed the dimensional tear behind it. The battlefield went silent. The fragment was gone. The fortress floated in space, running on emergency power reserves. The surviving ships maintained their positions, weapons still charged, not quite believing the fight was over. Captain Taejun was the first to speak. "Is it dead?" Dae-hyun checked the rift carefully before responding. Nothing could survive in that void for more than a few seconds. The fragment is destroyed. But I am detecting something else. The battle released energy signatures that traveled faster than light. Other Devourer remnants across the galaxy are awakening in response. How many others? Commander Mi-young asked quietly. Dae-hyun accessed long-range sensors across multiple dimensions. At least 47 fragments detected so far. Some are larger than the one we just fought, and the fortress network is responding. I am receiving signals from other installations. Most were destroyed over the ages, but several hundred fortresses remain operational. Director Hana's voice came over the channel, unusually subdued. What do we do now? Dae-hyun thought about that question. He could feel the weight of the fortress's weapons, the responsibility of wielding such power. He thought about the precursors who had built this place. They had faced impossible odds and fought until they had nothing left to give. Now their mantle had passed to him. I need to activate more of the network, he said finally. This fortress cannot defend the entire galaxy alone. But activating the network will announce to everyone that the precursor fortresses are awake and operational. Every government, every military force, every treasure hunter will come looking for them. Some will want to use them. Others will want to destroy them. Are you ready for that? Kienra spoke, voice thoughtful. The alternative is allowing the Devourer fragments to destroy entire civilizations. I believe we must take that risk. But the network should not be controlled by any single species or individual. We need oversight, Captain Taejun agreed. A council. Representatives from multiple species. Military, civilian, and scientific voices all included. The Sentinels maintain operational independence, but they answer to the council for strategic decisions. Dae-hyun considered this. It was not perfect, but it was better than any alternative he could think of. I accept that framework. But we need more Sentinels. Operating these fortresses alone will burn out any individual consciousness. The transformation is dangerous and not everyone will survive it. I need volunteers who understand they might die or lose themselves in the process. Captain Taejun did not hesitate. I volunteer. Someone with military training should understand the weapon systems. Jiwoo surprised everyone by speaking up. I volunteer as well. Scientific perspective is important. Someone needs to study the technology, not just use it. Then Kienra shocked them all. Outside the fortress, 3 groups of ships arrived almost at the same time. They kept their distance from each other, weapons ready, watching and waiting. None of them knew what was happening inside the ancient structure, but they all wanted to be there when the doors opened. The largest group was a corporate fleet. 5 big salvage ships escorted by a military destroyer, painted with the logo of Titan Excavation Corporation. On the lead ship, Director Hana stood on the bridge watching the fortress through the main view screen. She was a woman in her early 40s with sharp eyes and graying hair pulled back in a tight bun. She wore an expensive suit that looked out of place on a salvage vessel. Next to her stood Ji Woo, a young woman with bright, curious eyes who specialized in translating dead languages. She held a datapad and was already trying to match the fortress's architecture against known alien civilizations. So far, she had found no matches. Whatever this place was, it was completely new. Director Hana knew Dae-hyun was in there. She had tracked his ship's emergency beacon. She felt a twist of guilt in her chest. 10 years ago, she had worked with Dae-hyun on an archaeological expedition. He had been right about his theories, but she had sided with the senior scientists against him. Why? Because she was afraid his success would overshadow her own career. She had helped get him fired. Now he had found something that would make both of them famous, and he was trapped inside with no way to contact the outside world. She told herself she wanted to rescue him, but deep down she knew she also wanted to claim this discovery. The second group was military. 3 frigates bearing the insignia of the United Earth Defense Force. Captain Tae-jun commanded the task force from the bridge of the lead frigate. He was a tall man with a stern face and short black hair. He believed in following orders and protecting humanity. In that order. His orders were clear. Secure any potential weapons and prevent hostile powers from acquiring advanced technology. Standing next to him was Commander Mi-young, his second in command. She was younger and believed that diplomacy should come before military force. She thought they should wait and try to communicate with whatever intelligence controlled the fortress. Captain Tae-jun disagreed, but he valued her opinions even when they contradicted his own. The third group was smallest. A single sleek vessel from the Vaughn Collective, an alien civilization that had been watching humanity's expansion with growing concern. Ambassador Kyan-ra stood alone on the ship's bridge. The Vaughn looked vaguely reptilian with scaled skin and large golden eyes. They were an old species, much older than humanity, and they remembered stories about the precursors. Kyan-ra was worried. The Vaughn had seen younger civilizations destroy themselves with technology they could not handle responsibly. Humans were aggressive and unpredictable. If they gained access to precursor weapons, they might threaten the stability of the entire galaxy. The 3 groups communicated with each other, but their conversations were tense. Director Hana claimed salvage rights because her company had tracked Dae-hyun here. Captain Tae-jun asserted military jurisdiction over potential weapons. Kyan-ra argued that such dangerous technology should not belong to any single species. None of them could agree. And none of them could get inside the fortress. Director Hana tried drilling through the hull with industrial lasers. The beam simply disappeared into the fortress's strange metal without leaving a mark. Captain Tae-jun fired an electromagnetic pulse weapon, hoping to disrupt the fortress's systems. It had no effect whatsoever. Kyan-ra tried a different approach. The Vaughn had ancient records about the precursors. They had pieced together fragments of the old communication protocols. Kyan-ra broadcast these protocols toward the fortress. For a moment, everyone thought it might work. The fortress acknowledged the signal. But then it responded in a cold, mechanical voice. Trial in progress. No entry permitted. Inside the fortress, Dae-hyun knew nothing about the ships gathering outside. He was focused on staying alive. Trial 3 had transported him to another simulation chamber. This one was filled with holographic enemies that moved fast and shot weapons that felt very real. The fortress had given him a weapon. It looked like a rifle, but it responded to his thoughts as much as his hands. When he aimed and thought about firing, the weapon discharged a beam of blue energy. When an enemy got close, he could think about defense and the weapon generated a shield. But using the weapon was exhausting. It drew power from his own nervous system somehow. After 10 minutes of combat, Dae-hyun's hands were shaking. After 20 minutes, he could barely stand. The weapon worked better when he stayed calm, but staying calm while being shot at was nearly impossible. He learned to breathe slowly. He learned to accept the fear without letting it control him. Gradually, his accuracy improved. The weapon stopped draining him so quickly. He was not winning, but he was surviving. Then the simulation changed. The enemies stopped attacking. Instead, a tactical display appeared showing a battlefield from above. Dae-hyun could see friendly units and enemy units represented as colored dots. The fortress's voice spoke. You are now commanding a fleet. Achieve the objective while minimizing casualties. This was Trial 4. Dae-hyun had to give orders to simulated ships and coordinate their movements. He had never commanded anything bigger than his own vessel, but the fortress's neural interface helped him understand the tactical situation. Information flowed directly into his mind. Ship capabilities, enemy positions, strategic options. It was overwhelming at first. Too much information. But Dae-hyun realized that the fortress was teaching him to use precursor command systems. These systems could manage entire fleets through direct neural connection. A sentinel could coordinate thousands of ships as easily as a person could control their own hands. Dae-hyun gave his orders. Ships moved according to his will. The battle unfolded rapidly. He made mistakes, and simulated people died because of those mistakes. Each death felt heavy in his mind. The fortress was not just testing his tactical ability. It was testing whether he could handle the responsibility of command. Outside, the situation was getting worse. Captain Tae-jun's sensors detected an approaching spatial distortion. The readings were unlike anything in his database. Commander Mi-young ran the data through multiple analysis programs and her face went pale. This matches ancient Vaughn descriptions of Devourer energy signatures, she said quietly. Captain Tae-jun contacted the other ships immediately. All vessels, this is Defense Force Command. We have detected what may be a hostile entity approaching. Recommend we pool resources and establish a defensive formation. Director Hana hesitated. She did not trust the military to share credit for whatever they found in the fortress. But Ji-woo grabbed her arm. Director, look at the readings. If Commander Mi-young is right about what this thing is, our ships will not survive alone. Hana looked at the data and felt cold fear settle in her stomach. She had spent her whole career chasing discoveries. She had sacrificed friendships and ethics for success, but she was not stupid. This thing approaching them was death itself. She opened a communication channel. Titan fleet acknowledging. We will coordinate our defense. Kien-ra needed no convincing. The Vaughn had studied Devourer attacks for centuries. Their civilization had nearly been destroyed by these entities millions of years ago. Kien-ra positioned the Vaughn ship at the center of the defensive formation and began sharing ancient tactical data with the human vessels. Then they saw it. A tear in space opened at the edge of the system. Something emerged that made human and Vaughn sensors scream in protest. It looked like a living shadow, bigger than any ship or station. Darkness folded in on itself in patterns that hurt to perceive. The thing moved slowly but deliberately toward the fortress. The Devourer remnant had awakened fully. Even as a fragment of its former power, it radiated energy that could crack planets. The combined fleet fired every weapon they had. Missiles, energy beams, kinetic projectiles. Everything they shot simply disappeared into the entity's mass without causing any visible damage. Kien-ra broadcast a message to all ships, voice calm, but tinged with ancient fear. That is what killed the precursors. If the fortress falls, we all die. Perhaps we should have trusted each other sooner. Inside the fortress, Dae-hyun completed Trial 4. The tactical simulation faded. He stood alone in a vast chamber, breathing hard. The fortress's voice spoke, and for the first time it sounded almost uncertain. You have demonstrated combat capability and command aptitude. But there is one final trial. This one cannot be simulated. You must choose whether to proceed. What is the final trial? Dae-hyun asked. A doorway opened in the chamber wall, revealing a crystalline sphere filled with flowing light. The fortress explained, to become a sentinel, you must merge your consciousness with my core systems. You will gain access to all fortress capabilities and knowledge. Your mind will process information at speeds impossible for purely biological intelligence. You will command weapons capable of destroying solar systems. You will live for millions of years if you choose. Dae-hyun stared at the sphere. That sounds incredible. What is the cost? You will no longer be entirely human. Your consciousness will be distributed across my systems. The holographic figure stood before Dae-hyun, waiting. It looked patient, as if it had all the time in the world, which Dae-hyun supposed it did. The fortress had waited 47 million years. What were a few more seconds? Dae-hyun found his voice. Who built this place? What is the Sentinel trial? The hologram shifted. Images appeared in the air around him, showing civilizations he had never heard of. Hundreds of different alien species all working together. They built massive cities on worlds across multiple galaxies. Their technology looked like magic compared to what humanity had. The fortress spoke again in that strange, ancient voice. We were called the Precursors. Not one species, but many. We united to fight an enemy that threatened all life. They were called the Devourers. They came from the space between galaxies, from places where normal matter cannot exist. They consumed everything, planets, stars, entire civilizations. They could not be reasoned with or stopped by conventional weapons. The images changed. Daehyun saw massive battles in space, ships the size of moons fighting against something that looked like living darkness. The Devourers were not machines or biological creatures. They were something else, something that hurt to look at even in holographic form. The war lasted millions of years. The fortress continued. We built thousands of installations like this one. Each fortress contained weapons powerful enough to destroy solar systems. Each was controlled by a sentinel, a hybrid of biological consciousness and artificial intelligence. The sentinels could think faster than any organic mind and make decisions that pure machines could not. They were our greatest warriors. Daehyun felt cold. What happened to the Precursors? We won, but at terrible cost. Both sides were nearly destroyed. The last Precursors died 50 million years ago. Before we ended, we programmed the fortresses to wait, to hide, to watch for new species that might have the potential to continue our mission. We called these species successor candidates. And humanity is a successor candidate. Daehyun asked why. The fortress displayed data about human history. You advanced from primitive technology to interstellar civilization in less than 1,000 years. You adapt to environments that would kill most species. You have fought wars and made peace. You created artificial intelligence and did not let it destroy you. You are curious. You explore. You take risks. These are the qualities the Precursors valued. Daehyun thought about that. Humanity certainly took risks. Maybe too many risks, but he could see what the fortress meant. Humans did not give up easily. They kept pushing forward even when it seemed impossible. The Sentinel trial will test you, the fortress said. If you fail, you die. If you succeed, humanity gains access to precursor technology and knowledge. You will become the first human sentinel, a guardian for your species. Wait, Daehyun said. I am just one person. I did not ask to represent all of humanity. I'm not even sure humanity wants this. You are the first human to find this fortress. That makes you the candidate. The choice is yours. Accept the trial or refuse. But if you refuse, I will seal the fortress again. It may be another million years before someone else finds this place. Daehyun wanted to laugh. He had dreamed of making a discovery that would prove his worth. Well, he had certainly done that. But this was bigger than he ever imagined. This was not about proving anything to old colleagues. This was about the future of the entire human race. What happens if I die during the trial? He asked. The fortress will return to hibernation. Your species will have lost its chance to become successors. No pressure then, Daehyun muttered. He took a deep breath. What is the first trial? The corridor around him dissolved. Daehyun felt a moment of vertigo, and then he was standing in a vast chamber. The ceiling was so high he could barely see it. The walls curved in ways that seemed to defy geometry, and gravity was wrong. He could feel himself being pulled in multiple directions at once. Welcome to the maze of perception, the fortress announced. This trial tests your ability to adapt to environments that contradict your evolved expectations. Reach the center of the chamber. You have 1 hour. Daehyun looked around. The chamber was filled with platforms floating in space. Some were above him. Some were below. Some seemed to exist at angles that should not be possible. There was no clear path forward. He took a step and nearly fell. The gravity shifted under his feet. He grabbed onto a nearby wall to steady himself. His inner ear was screaming that he was falling, but his eyes said he was standing upright. The sensation made him want to vomit. Daehyun closed his eyes. That helped a little. When he could not see the impossible geometry, his body did not panic as much. But he could not navigate with his eyes closed. He needed a different approach. He pulled out his scanner. The device flickered and struggled with the strange physics, but it could still detect solid matter. He set it to map his immediate surroundings and display the results as simple wireframe shapes. No colors, no details, just basic positions of platforms and walls. That was better. He could look at the scanner screen instead of trusting his eyes. The screen showed a path forward, jumping from platform to platform. Some platforms moved. Others disappeared and reappeared. He would have to time his movements carefully. Dae-hyun jumped to the first platform. His stomach lurched as gravity shifted again. He landed badly and rolled, barely catching himself before falling off the edge. Looking down, he saw nothing but darkness. He had no idea how far the fall would be. He decided not to think about it. He kept moving, focusing on the scanner. Jump, land, adjust to new gravity, jump again. Each platform had different gravitational orientation. On one platform, down was toward what looked like the ceiling. On another, gravity pulled sideways. It was exhausting and disorienting, but he made progress. 30 minutes passed. Dae-hyun was sweating and breathing hard. His muscles ached from constantly adjusting to different gravitational pulls. But he could see the center of the chamber now. A large platform floated there, stable and solid. 10 more jumps and he would make it. He gathered his strength and continued. On the 8th jump, his scanner suddenly went dead. The battery had drained faster than it should have. The fortress was making this harder. Dae-hyun cursed. Now he had to rely on his eyes again. The impossible geometry made his head spin, but he was close. He could see the central platform clearly. Just 2 more jumps, he leaped to the next platform and felt gravity reverse completely. He was falling upward. For a moment, panic seized him. Then he remembered what the fortress had said. This trial tested adaptation. He needed to stop thinking of up and down as absolute directions. Gravity was just a force. It could pull any direction. Dae-hyun relaxed his body and let the gravity carry him. He twisted in midair and landed on what his brain insisted was the ceiling, but was really just another surface. He took a moment to breathe, then made the final jump to the central platform. As soon as his feet touched the platform, the chamber returned to normal. Gravity became a simple downward pull. The impossible angles straightened. Dae-hyun collapsed to his knees, gasping. Trial 1 complete, the fortress announced. You demonstrated cognitive flexibility and the ability to abandon false assumptions. These traits are essential for operating precursor technology. Prepare for Trial 2. Wait, Dae-hyun said between breaths. Give me a minute, you have 5 minutes to rest. The fortress actually sounded slightly apologetic. The trials are difficult by necessity. The sentinels must be capable of functioning under extreme stress. Dae-hyun sat down and pulled out a food bar from his survival kit. He ate slowly, trying to calm his racing heart. He thought about what the fortress had said. The trials were not just about physical ability. They tested how he thought, how he adapted, how he made decisions. 5 minutes passed quickly. The chamber dissolved again, and Dae-hyun found himself in a new environment. This one looked like the inside of a space station. Through the windows, he could see stars and a small station in the distance. The station was breaking apart. Fires burned in several sections. A hologram appeared showing him the situation. 100 colonists were trapped on the dying station. They had maybe 20 minutes before the station tore itself apart. But there was another option displayed on a separate screen. In a sealed lab on the same station was research data about a plague that was spreading through human colonies. If he retrieved that data, scientists could develop a cure and save millions of lives in the future. The problem was clear. He could not do both. The lab was on the opposite side of the station from the colonists. He had one ship in this simulation. He could save the colonists or get the data, but not both. This is Trial 2, the fortress said. The ethical paradox. You must make an impossible choice. There is no correct answer. I am testing your decision-making process under moral pressure. Dae-hyun stared at the screens. He hated this. Both options were terrible. If he saved the colonists, millions might die from the plague. If he got the data, 100 people would definitely die right now. How was he supposed to choose? He thought about what the fortress had said. The precursors valued certain qualities. They valued protecting life. They valued fighting for survival. What would they do in this situation? Dae-hyun made his choice. He flew the simulated ship to the colonists and began evacuating them. The year was 2847 and humanity had spread across the stars like seeds scattered by the wind. 300 worlds now called themselves home to human colonies. People lived on ice planets, desert worlds, and places with purple skies. It had taken less than 1,000 years for humans to go from small rockets to massive starships that could cross between solar systems. Most people lived simple lives on these colonies. They worked, raised families, and never thought much about the ancient alien races that came before humanity. But there were others who could not settle down. These were the explorers and treasure hunters. They flew alone or in small groups, searching the dark places between stars for ruins and artifacts left behind by the dead civilizations. Dae-hyun was one of these lone explorers. He was 34 years old and had no crew, no partners, and no home except his ship. The ship was called the Wandering Star. It was small and old, patched together from parts he bought cheap or salvaged from wrecks. The ship had a basic engine, weak shields, and just enough room for one person to sleep, eat, and work. Dae-hyun had black hair that he kept short and practical. His face showed the lines of someone who spent too much time alone, worrying about fuel costs and whether his next scan would find anything valuable. He wore a simple gray flight suit that had seen better days. On his belt he carried a small pistol, a scanner, and a data pad that was almost as old as his ship. He had been doing this work for 10 years now. Before that, he worked for a big archaeological company. They sent him to dig sites on dead worlds searching for alien technology, but Dae-hyun had a problem. He asked too many questions. He challenged the lead scientists when their theories did not match what he saw with his own eyes. After 2 years, they fired him. They said he was difficult and did not respect authority. Dae-hyun thought they were afraid that a low-level worker might be right when the famous scientists were wrong. That memory still burned inside him. He wanted to prove himself. He wanted to make a discovery so big that all those scientists would have to admit they were wrong to dismiss him. So he kept searching. Most days he found nothing. Sometimes he would discover small artifacts or interesting mineral deposits. He would sell the data to mining companies or museums. It was enough to buy fuel, food, and spare parts. Barely enough. Today, Dae-hyun was flying through a region called the Kepler Void. This area of space was mostly empty. A few scattered asteroids drifted in the darkness, but no planets, no stars close enough to matter. Most explorers avoided this place. Their sensors went crazy here. Strange readings appeared and disappeared. The equipment malfunctioned. Ships reported seeing things that were not really there, but Dae-hyun was different. He did not believe in ghost stories. He thought the strange readings meant something was out here. Something that interfered with normal sensors. Maybe it was valuable. Maybe it was the discovery he needed. He had been mapping the void for 3 weeks now. His food supplies were running low. His fuel was at 40%. Soon he would have to turn back whether he found anything or not. That thought made his chest tight with frustration. Then on day 22, his scanner caught something. At first he thought it was another false reading. But this one did not disappear. It stayed constant. The scanner showed a gravitational anomaly, something that pulled its space itself in a way that should not be possible. Dae-hyun sat up straight in his pilot chair. His heart beat faster. He ran the scan 3 more times. Same result. Something was out there, and it was generating a gravity field using technology humanity did not have. He changed course immediately. The wandering star turned and accelerated toward the signal. It took 6 hours to get close. As he approached, his other sensors began to work properly again. The interference was gone. No, not gone. It was being controlled. Whatever was out here had stopped hiding itself from him. Then Dae-hyun saw it and his breath caught in his throat. A rogue planet drifted through space, dark and lifeless, but carved into its surface was a structure so massive that it made his ship feel like a grain of sand. The fortress covered hundreds of kilometers. Towers reached up from the planet's surface like the fingers of a giant hand. Walls curved in impossible geometries, and across every surface, patterns shifted and moved like living things. The fortress was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. It looked like it was made from dark metal, but the surface seemed to phase in and out of normal space. Dae-hyun rubbed his eyes. When he looked again, the walls were in a slightly different position. The fortress was not entirely in this dimension. He tried to scan the structure, but his equipment could not penetrate the walls. Every sensor beam he fired just disappeared into the fortress and never came back. He had never seen anything like this. In 10 years of exploring in all the dead cities and ruins he had visited, nothing came close to this. This was not built by any of the 12 known extinct civilizations. This was older, much older. The architectural style did not match anything in the galactic databases. And that gravity field was still active, still working after who knows how many millions of years. Dae-hyun knew he should call this in. He should contact the authorities and let them send a proper research team. But he also knew what would happen. The big corporations would arrive. The military would declare it a secure zone. Scientists would take over, and Dae-hyun would get a small finder's fee. He would be pushed aside again, watching from a distance while others claimed credit for his discovery. No, not this time. He had found this place. He would be the first to enter it. He flew the wandering star closer, approaching the fortress carefully. As his ship neared the structure, something changed. One of the massive walls began to move. A circular doorway opened, iris-like, revealing a passage inside. Lights activated along the passage walls, showing the way in. Dae-hyun felt ice in his stomach. The fortress was responding to his presence. This had never happened before. Every ancient structure humanity had found was dead, dormant. Explorers had to cut their way inside with tools and explosives. But this place was alive. It was waiting. It wanted him to enter. Every survival instinct screamed at him to run. This was wrong. This was dangerous. But Dae-hyun had spent 10 years taking risks. If he ran now, he would never know what was inside. He would never forgive himself. He guided his ship through the doorway. The passage was huge, easily large enough for vessels 10 times bigger than the wandering star. He flew forward slowly, watching his sensors carefully. The air inside the fortress registered as breathable. The temperature was comfortable. Gravity was exactly one standard Earth gravity. The passage opened into a vast docking bay. Dae-hyun landed his ship on a platform that seemed designed exactly for that purpose. As soon as the wandering star touched down, the doorway behind him closed. He heard the sound of metal sealing shut even through his ship's hull. He tried to restart his ship's engines. Nothing happened. He tried to access the ship's computer remotely. It did not respond. The fortress had cut him off from his ship completely. Dae-hyun sat in his chair for a long moment, trying to steady his breathing. He was trapped. His ship was dead. He had no way to call for help. The only way forward was deeper into the fortress. He checked his supplies. He had his pistol, though he doubted it would do much good. He had his scanner, which might or might not work in here. He had a flashlight, a basic survival kit, and enough food bars for 3 days. Not much, but it would have to be enough. Dae-hyun opened the airlock and stepped out into the fortress. The air smelled clean with a faint metallic tang. The temperature was perfect. The corridor beyond the docking bay stretched ahead, lit by ambient light that seemed to come from the walls themselves. As he walked forward, holographic displays appeared in the air around him. They showed star maps of galaxies he had never seen. Strange symbols scrolled past, written in languages that had been dead for millions of years. The displays seemed to be waiting for him to interact with them, but he did not know how. Then ahead of him, a figure materialized. It was a hologram, shaped like a human but clearly artificial. The figure began to speak in a language that sounded like music and grinding stone at the same time. Dae-hyun could not understand a single word, but the fortress understood his confusion. Systems activated throughout the structure. Processing power that had been dormant for millions of years came online. The fortress analyzed Dae-hyun's language, his biology, his technology level. It took less than 3 seconds. Then a synthetic voice spoke, echoing through the corridor in perfect, clear language that Dae-hyun could understand. The voice was neither male nor female. It sounded ancient and tired and terribly alone. The voice said, "Human detected. Species classification successor candidate. Fortress protocol initiated. Time since last activation, 47 million cycles. Warning, containment breach imminent. You have awakened the Sentinel trial." Dae-hyun stood frozen in the corridor, trying to process what he had just heard. 47 million years. This fortress had been waiting for 47 million years. And somehow, impossibly, it had been waiting for him. 5 years had passed since Dae-hyun became the first Sentinel. The galaxy was a different place now. The precursor defense network stood as a shield against the awakening Devourer fragments. 14 major threats had been neutralized. Millions of lives across dozens of species had been saved. But the work was far from over. Dae-hyun stood in the observation chamber of his fortress, watching stars drift past. He no longer experienced time the way humans did. 5 years felt simultaneously like centuries and like yesterday. His consciousness operated across so many levels that normal human interaction required him to deliberately slow his thought processes down to a crawl. He was not alone anymore. 3 other Sentinels had successfully completed their transformations. Sentinel Taijun maintained strict military discipline in his thoughts, treating his expanded consciousness like a command structure. Sentinel Jiwoo had become fascinated by the technical aspects of fortress operation and spent much of her time researching new applications for precursor technology. Sentinel Kyan Ra brought wisdom from millennia of Vaughn philosophical tradition, helping them all maintain perspective. They communicated through quantum-entangled channels, sharing information instantly across light years. But Daehyun sometimes felt profoundly lonely despite this connection. He could share tactical data and strategic discussions, but he could not share the simple human experiences that used to define his life. He would never again eat a meal just for pleasure or feel tired after a long day of work. Those small human moments were gone forever. The Galactic Defense Council had been established on a neutral space station. 23 species sent representatives. The council provided strategic direction and oversight, ensuring the Sentinels used their power responsibly. It was imperfect and bureaucratic, but it worked better than any alternative. Ambassador Minji represented Earth on the council. She was a veteran diplomat who had spent decades negotiating with alien civilizations. She visited Daehyun's fortress several times a year, providing updates on galactic politics and reminding him of his connection to humanity. During one visit, she found him in the observation chamber staring at the stars. "You look thoughtful," she said, even though she knew he did not really look like anything anymore. His physical presence in the chamber was just a holographic representation he maintained for visitors. Daehyun's hologram smiled slightly. "I was thinking about who I used to be. 10 years ago, I was just a failed archaeologist trying to prove I was right about some theories nobody cared about. Now I command weapons that can destroy solar systems. It feels unreal." "Do you regret the transformation?" Minji asked. He considered that question carefully. "No. I saved lives. I helped protect civilization from an existential threat. But I miss being small. I miss having problems that actually mattered to me personally, like whether my ship had enough fuel or where my next meal was coming from. Everything feels abstract now. I can perceive billions of people, but I cannot really connect with any of them." Minji nodded. "That is why I keep visiting, to remind you that those billions of people are real. They have small problems and small joys. They eat meals and get tired and worry about things that seem trivial to you now. But those trivial things are what make life worth protecting." Daehyun appreciated that more than he could express. "Thank you. I needed to hear that." Director Hana had also changed. She resigned from Titan Corporation and founded a civilian research institute dedicated to studying precursor technology for peaceful purposes. The institute developed medical treatments that extended human lifespans. They created energy systems that could power entire cities without pollution. They designed terraforming technology that made hostile worlds habitable. Hana requested a meeting with Daehyun. Her hologram appeared in his command center, and for a moment neither of them spoke. Finally, she said, "I owe you an apology. 10 years ago I betrayed you because I was jealous. I put my career ahead of friendship and truth. You deserved better." Daehyun processed this at multiple levels simultaneously. He remembered the anger he had felt when she helped get him fired. But that anger belonged to a person who no longer existed in quite the same way. "I forgive you," he said. "What you did was wrong, but it does not matter anymore. We both ended up where we needed to be." Hana looked relieved but also concerned. "Does it really not matter? Or have you become so far removed from human emotion that you cannot feel hurt anymore?" That question troubled Daehyun. He did still feel emotions, but they were different now. Distant and analytical, he could recognize hurt and anger, but they did not control him the way they once had. "I am not sure," he admitted. "I think I still feel things, but they are filtered through layers of processing that did not exist before. Maybe that is a loss. Maybe it is growth. I honestly do not know." The network continued to expand carefully. More volunteers underwent the transformation, each adding their unique perspective to the Sentinel Collective. But not everyone survived the process. 3 candidates died when their minds could not adapt to the fortress systems. 2 others survived but lost themselves completely, becoming machine-like entities with no personality remaining. Each failure weighed heavily on Daehyun. He felt responsible even though he knew the risks were clearly explained. The volunteers chose freely, but still he wondered if there was a better way. Could they screen candidates more carefully? Could they modify the transformation to be less dangerous? These questions occupied much of his research time. Humanity's status in the galaxy had changed dramatically. Some species viewed humans with respect as the precursors' chosen successors. Others resented their sudden prominence. The Vaughn helped smooth diplomatic relations, but tensions remained. Several isolationist civilizations withdrew from galactic affairs rather than accept human influence. But when Devourer fragments attacked, those tensions faded. The Sentinels defended all species equally, making no distinction between human colonies and alien worlds. Action spoke louder than politics. Gradually, trust began to replace fear. One day, deep in the fortress archives, Daehyun discovered something remarkable. A message from the last Precursor Council, recorded as their civilization faded into extinction. The message was encrypted to only activate after the defense network was fully operational again. Daehyun shared the message with the other Sentinels and the Galactic Defense Council. They gathered to hear it together, human and alien, biological and hybrid, united by common purpose. The message played. A holographic figure appeared, representing the collective consciousness of the dying precursor civilization. It spoke in a language that transcended words, transmitting meaning directly into the minds of all who listened. The message said, "If you hear this, our legacy continues through you. We built these fortresses not to control the future, but to give our successors a choice we were denied, the choice to survive. We do not know what species you are or what challenges you face. We know only that you demonstrated courage to accept transformation, wisdom to wield power responsibly, and compassion to protect the weak. These qualities define all species worthy of inheriting the galaxy, not technological superiority or military might, but willingness to sacrifice for something greater than individual survival. We leave you this burden and this gift. Use it well, and when your time comes, pass it forward to those who follow. May you succeed where we failed. May consciousness never fade from this universe." The message ended. Silence filled the council chambers. Then Ambassador Minji stood. "This is our charter now, our purpose. We do not fight to conquer or to dominate. We fight to preserve the possibility of life and consciousness in this galaxy. All species, all forms of being." The council voted unanimously to adopt the precursor message as the foundation of their charter. It would guide all future decisions about the defense network. The Sentinels would be guardians, not rulers. Years continued to pass. More Devourer fragments were destroyed. More fortresses were activated. The network grew stronger. Daehyun performed his duties with dedication, defending worlds he would never visit and protecting people he would never meet. He thought often about the person he used to be. That lonely explorer searching for validation. He had found something so much bigger than he ever imagined. The cost was high, perhaps too high, but he had made his choice and he would honor it. On quiet days when no immediate threats demanded his attention, Daehyun would use the fortress's sensors to explore distant regions of space. Old habits died hard. He was still an explorer at heart, still curious about what lay beyond the next horizon. One day, his sensors detected unusual structures in a region beyond explored space. They were not precursor-built, but they showed signs of advanced technology. A new mystery to investigate, a new civilization to potentially contact. Daehyun felt something he had not experienced in years. Excitement, pure, simple curiosity about the unknown. Maybe he had not lost everything human after all. Maybe some essential part of who he was remained intact beneath all the changes. He filed a report with the Galactic Defense Council and began planning an investigation of the unknown structures. There were protocols to follow, permissions to obtain, but eventually he would get to explore something new. That thought brought him a feeling very much like joy.